everyone. My name's Grace Hayek, and on behalf of the Glencoe Public Library, I welcome you to our program tonight with Carrie Hoza. Here's how the evening is going to unfold. We'll begin with a slideshow narrated by Carrie and follow it with a conversation between her and Holly Marihugh. Holly is a writer, editor, and book group discussion leader who's lived in Winnetka for 28 years. She recently worked with Carrie to publish the emails she wrote while serving in Iraq, and the result is the book Love, Mother Goose, which you'll learn more about tonight. After Carrie and Holly's conversation, Carrie will be glad to answer your questions. The library's co-sponsor for this event is the Glencoe Council for Inclusion and Community. The GCIC is excited to show its support for Captain Hoza, who's more affectionately known by her call sign, Mother Goose, and to celebrate her book. As you'll learn, Carrie's book highlights the importance of community and the act of sharing our stories, a practice that builds empathy and understanding. Now for a bit about our presenter. She's already packed a ton into her life, and so this introduction will be a little longer than usual. Bear with me. It's interesting. A lifelong resident of Winnetka, Carrie graduated from New Trier and attended Carroll College in Waukesha, Wisconsin. She also participated in the ROTC program at Marquette University at the suggestion of her Vietnam veteran father, who's with us tonight. On graduation, Carrie was commissioned as a second lieutenant and completed officer training at Fort Eustis, Virginia. After 4.5 months there, Carrie went to her duty station in Tongducheon, South Korea, where she was a platoon leader in a truck company that transported supplies and soldiers. After a year in South Korea, Carrie made her way back to the USA and finished up her active duty at Fort Bliss in El Paso, where she started up and ran a transportation truck driving school for enlisted soldiers. In 2001, Carrie left the military with 5 years still to go on her contract and worked for Harley-Davidson as a machine shop supervisor. 3 years into her civilian life, she was called back to duty and deployed to Iraq as a convoy commander, hauling JP-8 jet fuel through the Sunni Triangle. After an intense year that you'll hear about tonight, Carrie came home and made her way back to the Winnetka family business, working side by side with her family at Bratshee Plumbing. She spent 5 years as a plumbing apprentice and obtained her plumbing license in 2014. She's the 4th generation in her family business. Carrie Hoza was awarded the Bronze Star for her tour of duty in Iraq. Thank you for sharing your story with us tonight, Carrie, and I will let you take it from here.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I really just want to thank you all for coming tonight, and really just appreciate the coming out in this crazy, dreary, now warm weather. I'd like to thank Grace for organizing this event, along with Hillary Scott, and all the hard work that the Glencoe Public Library has done for this event tonight. To all my fellow veterans in the room, welcome and thank you for your service. If you could raise your hands, I'd just like you to raise your hand if you're a veteran. Thank you. Thank you for your service. That gets me a little emotional. I appreciate the kind words, Grace and Hillary, the thoughtful words on community and the importance of sharing, and also the interest in sharing my story with all of you. And I would be amiss if I did not mention my great thanks to my family and friends that are here, and some not here tonight, for having supported me for my entire life, even pre-Iraq. Especially to my dad, Phil Hoza, right here, for never giving up on this book and me. A huge shout out to Holly Marihugh, who, without her gentle nudge, kind friendship, guidance, and overall amazingness, I might still be fighting Phil on whether or not this book got published, because it was about 20 years in the making. So without the two of you, Love, Mother Goose does not exist. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy my story. And at the end of tonight, as Grace said, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. No pun intended. I am an open book. Feel free to ask anything. I'll try to answer it as best as I can. So with that, we're going to just go on to the slideshow. It's about to get dark. So this is my platoon, 3rd Platoon, with the 660th Transportation Company. As Grace said, I had been active duty for 3 years and got out, was living my best life at Harley Davidson as a supervisor in the machine shop. Not a care in the world except getting to work. I was not doing anything with the military. I was in the IRR, which is individual, inactive, ready, reserve. And I was like, okay, here we go. Life is good. I'm a civilian. 9/11 happened. My, at the time, Army boyfriend or former Army boyfriend and I were like, are we going to get called up? Neither of us got called up. Okay, we're good. March 2003, when the Iraq war kicked off, I was no longer with the guy, but thought, thought to myself, am I going to get called up? No. And I believe my best friend, who was sitting in the back of this audience, said, what happens if you do? I said, they will be digging at the bottom of the barrel if they call me up. So what happens? Well, December 4th comes around, and at 10:30 in the morning, because I'm working second shift at Harley, I get this FedEx letter in the mail, because even Uncle Sam doesn't trust the U.S. Postal System. I get a letter in the mail, and it said, this is December 4th, it said, you are to report to Fort Snelling Soldier Readiness Processing by 6 a.m. on Monday, December 8th. And I was like, wait, who, what? I called my mother immediately and was like, I think I just got called up. And then I called Harley Davidson. They were amazing throughout this entire process and through my entire tour. But I went in there and I did a few administrative things, and then I never returned to Harley Davidson because on Sunday, December 7th, I was flying up to Fort Snelling, Minnesota. Found in the meantime, my apartment looked like vomit of camouflage because I was sorting through all these boxes, trying to figure out where my uniforms were. Do I even remember how to put it on? Am I doing this properly? It was disastrous. So went up there, and by the end of the day, I did have orders to Iraq. And thankfully, my first sergeant said, well, we're actually mobilizing to Camp Atterbury in Edinburgh, Indiana. He's like, can you come here like in the next day or two? I was like, can I have a few days to like get my life situated? So he gave me until December 15th. So I got home on the 10th, and 5 days later, I was headed down to Camp Atterbury to meet my delightful, wonderful platoon, 3rd platoon. The thing about the 660th is that headquarters, 1st and 2nd platoon, they were part of this company organically. They were part of the 660th. 3rd platoon was cross-level, brought in from all different places. New York, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. We came from all over the place. We were a motley crew of just misfits. And I was the only female. So it was interesting. My youngest was 18. My oldest was 53. So we get down to Camp Atterbury and we start training. And you start remembering all the things that you did in like basic camp and all the things that you did in all your training. This is us coming out of the gas chambers where they kind of test your equipment, your gas masks with CS gas, and you come out and your nose is running, your eyes are running, you're flapping your arms, my eyes are open, my arms are flapping, I'm breathing. And that was our training. And it was just kind of like oh, here you go. You were a civilian a couple days ago, and now we're just going to dump you into the fire or gas. So we did training. I got to meet my guys, and we went from there to a deployment. And from there we went. People were very proud of this deploying, got tattoos to commemorate the trip. From there, we were at the Indianapolis airport. We were in the bottom of a baggage claim in a section where they did not have civilians because we were not, nobody was supposed to know that we were going. We did not see any human, like any non-military people. It was basically our platoon, our company, I'm sorry, our company. And we just sat there, we waited for the plane. It was a civilian plane, but we loaded it. We had people load up all our baggage and stuff. The one well, on the way back, not as well, but the 2 times I flew there and then ultimately home, never had thought about, oh, we don't have to go through the TSA or anything because we all had our weapons underneath our chairs. We were flying with our M16s and our machine guns and stuff. So it was kind of interesting. They don't want people knowing where you're going or what's going on. So we loaded the plane and off we went. Went from Indiana to Shannon, Ireland to Kuwait. Got to Kuwait at like 3, 4 in the morning. Got ourselves organized. And from there, we moved into tents in Kuwait. This is 18 people per this tent. I was one of 2 females in this tent. There's about a foot between each cot. And we were here we deployed on February 7th, and we were here until March 5th. So those were our sleeping conditions for a month. This was 2004, February of 2004. And we got there and it was nice. I mean, back here in Chicago in February, you all know how that goes. We were like, oh, it's like 70 degrees. This is awesome. It was wonderful. It was a pause in time. We were doing much training as we possibly could without really a lot of our equipment. We didn't have our equipment. The equipment was on the boat coming over to Iraq or to Kuwait. So we didn't have a lot of equipment, but we did what training we could. And just a note here, we were training off of old Vietnam doctrine. All of our stuff was like, if you get hit, get out and defend your convoy. And I'm thinking to myself, we are going in 40-ton tankers of JP-8 jet fuel. I am not getting out of this bomb. We are going forward. We are getting out of the kill zone. So there was a lot of on-the-job training throughout the entire year, actually. So Kuwait, it was fun. You were carefree, no threat of enemy, camels, beautiful scenery, as you can see. Our tents is the tents right there. You see that long thing kind of jutting out. Those were like a long hallway because when they got sandstorms, the sand was like powdered sugar flying around. It was so fine that you'd have to go in there and then kind of let things settle before you could go in the tent, just to kind of decrease the amount of dust and sand you got in the tents. We didn't send our laundry anywhere because we never knew when we were going. They never really said, oh, you're going to leave on this day or that day. You just were kind of, again, a pause in time. Until it wasn't a pause in time. And we headed north. So on March 5th, back then they were saying you can't drive at night. So we would drive during the day. So we would drive to the border. And then the second day, we would drive up to Balad, Iraq, which is where LSA Anaconda is, logistical support area. This is the vehicle I deployed in. Can anybody guess what's missing? Doors, armor. So there were some sandbags at my feet. But if you look towards the back, there's a M60 machine gun up there. My gunner was basically rear end in the wind driving up into Iraq. That's how we deployed. This is 2004. The United States military was very, very green on the war front. Eventually, some did get a little bit. That doesn't really even have that much armor. It's just kind of I don't want to say hillbilly job, but I did deploy with people from Cadiz, Ohio, so they were crafty. And we eventually got to our new home. This is a warehouse Most people were in tents, eventually moved into trailers. We were very fortunate to be kind of outside of all of the hub and bub. We were kind of on our own in this great big warehouse, which kind of isolated us, but it was great because we were there to do a job. We weren't there very often, and nobody bothered us with silly garrison military rules and stuff. So that was nice. Life on LSA Anaconda. Some of our guys had to build their actual rooms. There were quite a few hooches, we call them, but our guys did build their own. That guy on the right, Lucas Burns, he was my youngest. He was 18. He called me mom. He's a good kid. I had to remind myself many times during the deployment that he was indeed 18. Like when he would leave his weapon random places. So yeah, they built places to live because we didn't have enough from the previous unit that had been there. So again, handy people. These guys were reservists, so the Army was not their primary job. And I will say one thing, I was an active duty snob thinking, oh, they're reservists. No, these guys had so many more skills than what I could ever anticipated or ever wanted. And I would deploy with these guys, these women and men any day of my life. This is looking from the top of the hooches. We would put stuff, there wasn't a lot of space, so we'd put like random stuff on top. And you'd have 1 to 2 people in each of those little buildings. It was just like a little village of plywood. That's me and my friend Amanda. I'm pointing to my hooch saying, this is mine. And that's me inside of it. It was that, and I had a cot, and I did have like, I think 1 shelf, not besides those shelves. And that's what it was. We didn't need clothing because you were either wearing your PT, your physical training uniform, or your brown DCU's, desert camo. But so you didn't need much. And I realized then after a year there that I really never needed anything material in my life. It really teaches you what's important. Like pets. Pets are always important. Bugs in the rainy seasons, tons of bugs, scorpions, camel spiders. I don't have a picture of a camel spider, but if you ever get a chance to Google it, do so. They can be as big as your foot. They're huge. But we were also fortunate being so far removed from the hub and bub of the installation that we had our own cooks and our own that deployed with us from the 660th. So we had our own chow hall. All the chicken and rice you could eat. It was great. But it was also great because we weren't on the installation very often. So there was always food. We didn't have regular eating hours. So that was always kind of nice to be able to come back and have that opportunity. We also had a little workout room that's in a bunker. I didn't partake in the working out very often there. So this was the beginning of our internet. It was horrible. They eventually got better, but this was, you had time limits. You couldn't always get on the internet. It was horrible. Initially, this was our phone service. Inside that little shack, there's a phone. It would connect you to a military installation back in the States. You'd get on it. You'd say, this is, Captain or Lieutenant, I was a lieutenant at the time. My name is Lieutenant Hoza. I'm trying to call my mom, my dad, whatever. And they would connect me to them. And you'd say hi, and then it would take a few beats, and then they would hear you on the other line say hi. And then it was more for I'm okay. This is a horrible way to communicate. Hi, I'm okay. This is a terrible way to communicate. And then, so it wasn't used often. I think I literally used it once or twice just to let them know that we got there. They did upgrade. Eventually, AT&T came to town. with computer centers and phones, and they were great. So much better, fairly reliable. I think there were a couple times, I think my family would agree, I'd be on the phone and then stuff would just kind of drop dead and you wouldn't know, but like you'd try and call back. And again, you had time limits on all of these things. For missions and support, I would go to battalion. This is outside of battalion. This is from Desert Storm. That's not anything we used, but I would go there for a briefing before missions. I'd go there the night before. I'd go there the morning of. At these meetings, I'd get intel on routes, enemy activity, anything that we really needed to know. That was my Humvee. This is later on. This is I finally had a fantastic National Guard unit out of Mississippi that was like, wait, what? They're not up armoring your vehicles because we weren't important enough, because there were other people like the military police that were going out every day. And I was like, great. I go out every day and I go 5 times as far as they do, but the installation didn't think it was important. So these people from Mississippi were like, next time you're here at Al Taqaddum, TQ, south of Fallujah, they were like, bring your vehicle here. We're going to up armor it. And they did that. So I had bulletproof glass. Those, you can't really see it, but those windows, they're probably a good few inches thick. The beautiful thing about that is it is a lot safer than what I was driving in. The not so beautiful thing about that is those vehicles are not air conditioned. So you'd get pretty hot. That little roof shanty thing did not last very long on the top there. I think they thought they were creating shade and it was not. My platoon sergeant, our first mission, again, you can note the weapon stand on the back of that truck. The first mission we went on, they did not even have anything covering the gunners. But we're smiling. Hey, we're happy, we're on the road. That comes later on down the road. We had more gear. You can see the inside. You can see the heavy handles that open and close those windows on the back. I had communications with my rear convoy commander and my gun trucks. I had a handheld radio that I could reach to some of my other truck drivers when we started hauling with KBR, because initially we were hauling with just Army. Then we moved to providing gun truck support for KBR. And so I had them. And then I also had an MTS tracker, which was basically like GPS with a keyboard, and I could communicate to my higher ups about any attacks, my locations, anything, any issues I was running into. So I could also communicate that way. And those are supposed to be bulletproof goggles, but I don't really know how bulletproof they would have been. Before missions, we would have a mission briefing on how it was going to go, where we were going to go. We would always welcome anybody who wanted to pray with us, whether you're religious or not. Sometimes they're just a moment of peace before you hit the road is needed. And then we would go. My vehicles were 40-ton tankers of JP-8 jet fuel. If they were not there, I was with KBR, who also were hauling JP-8 jet fuel. My convoys were 13 to 15 vehicles and 5 gun trucks. So once you space them out 100 meter in between each vehicle, my convoys range between 3 to 5 miles long. I don't know if you know this or not, it's not a very stealth way to move throughout a war zone. And we were also, I will say, a sexy target, because whether they're empty or full, they were very flammable and combustible and all the good things that the enemy likes to see, because a favorite transportation saying is nothing happens till something moves. So if you don't have fuel, you're not going anywhere. So every time we hit the roads, we were locked and loaded. This convoy here is not us. This is a little mine and IED sweeping crew that would occasionally we would see coming back. I don't know how often they supposedly swept our routes. Our main supply route, they swept all the time. Our alternate supply route, they did not sweep all the time. And our alternate supply route was 71 miles of landmines near Haditha Dam. And we used it as often as we used our main supply route. So it was kind of like, I don't know. These are Kiowa helicopters. They were there. This is a stock photo. They were there for support, but usually when we were getting hit, they couldn't fire down because we were in the kill zone. So they were, every time I called for support, they were like, "You're in the kill zone." I'm like, "I know." And I don't know how much, they weren't much help to us, but they're cute. My dad's a helicopter pilot. I got to put in a helicopter. They were training up the Iraqis to provide support, more so just to be a presence on the road. We never really got into conversation with them. We just kind of waved as we went by. And then occasionally you'd see tanks. This is up in Mosul. At checkpoints. So they were keeping track of civilians and whatnot. And then this is life on the road. Some roads were closed to traffic, which was always a little bit nicer. This is a sandstorm. This is on that 71 miles of landmines. That's the road in front of me. That's a vehicle about 25 meters behind me. It was a pucker factor. It was not fun when we had sandstorms on the road. It was a little harrowing. We also could run into traffic. So they were pretty good at, though, kind of dividing for us. But it could get a little chaotic in some of the busier areas, in the busier cities. We occasionally went through this one called Hit. And I was always like, well, I hate the name of this. I hate the name of this town. Are we going to get hit and hit? And there were awkward traffic circles in that town as well. Kids everywhere. Kids loved us. They would come and see us when we were coming into the gates. They would wave to us. They would try and sell contraband, whether that was illegal booze or not appropriate DVDs. Your guess at what you were going to get if you were to buy that, because it wasn't always accurate marketing on what they were selling. They loved gum. They loved it if we would give them stuff. They were cute. They were all around. And here's the sad part about it is they are living in a war zone. And as cute as they are, some of them are also the ones planting the IEDs when you're not looking. So you treat them as best you can, hoping that you can convey that you are a good force and not evil. And a lot of times, this little kid on the side of the road, it would not be uncommon for us to be like in our 3 to 5 miles of convoys hauling down the road, and these kids are just like hanging out on the side of the road. Parents, maybe a little bit close by, but or not. It was just a different world. It was very war torn. That's Tikrit. That's Saddam Hussein's hometown, correct, Mike? Yep. Shopping center. There was nothing there. We did not stop either. We traveled through Baghdad, Fallujah, Aramadi, Al-Taqadam, Al-Assad, all of the not so great areas. It was the Sunni Triangle is not a nice place. This is the Baghdad International Airport. Just a lot of bombed buildings that are no longer. I mean, are people in there? I possibly not all of them, obviously. One day you'd have buildings up, the next day you would come and buildings would be down. Bridges were made by the engineers, the Army Corps engineer. They made some great bridges. They would blow up the bridges and then they would remake the bridges. Oh, and this one right here, if you just look at garbage, so much garbage, very sad how much garbage there is. A lot of nomads, Brown. I had the worst headache when I first came back because I was so not used to all the colors. We were so used to brown. Did not like going through water. You never know what is underneath that water, whether it's an IED or a landmine. This is a floating bridge by the Army Corps Engineers, or Army Engineers, you know what I'm saying. You would go on that one vehicle at a time and just hope that you didn't get in any crossfires on your way. This was like my usual route right here. It was very open, sand, turn right at the pile of sand. We did everything by grid coordinates, and I was constantly dry erase on my windshield, translating meters into miles, so I knew when we were turning and where we were. I was really good at it back then. I couldn't tell you the difference of it today. Beautiful mosques, temples. There were some areas that did have rivers. This is from the Haditha Dam, and it was gorgeous. This is also right after 71 miles of landmines, or going into the landmines, depending on which way you're coming. But it was a beautiful area. This is a lake by Al Taqadum, which is just south of Fallujah. We did go swimming there. Hindsight 2020, you don't know what's in these lakes, but it was hot and we were excited. That's a guard tower. And just a sunset. And a lot of times we get pulled off the road because it was too hot. And I'm not talking temperature, I'm talking enemy activity. And there were tons of dogs around. We would get combined with other people. They would try to send headquarters out. So I say I was the only female. I was 99% of the time. Jenny Lee Beeler, she was a cook. They wanted the people from the rear to come out on missions with us so that they knew what we were going through, so that they could better support us. So we would mishmash into groups here and there, especially in the beginning, because we were running so many missions that people were just kind of gang cycled in and cycled out. The guy on the right lived across the aisle from me. The guy on the left, I've been on many missions with him, but none of these guys were in my platoon. These guys are all mine, not the dogs. But we just would hang out. When you're pulled off the road and it's a hurry up and wait, you sit and wait and you sit and wait. And you just kind of try to find things to do. And it's can be exhausting because you just are waiting because you know you still have to finish the mission. This is us finally getting to the mission, downloading the fuel, gravity fed into these huge bladders, like probably 2, 3, 4 times the size of this room. And that would fuel Humvees, jets, helicopters, anything that moves, we provided the fuel. There was always maintenance to do on and off the road. We never had a down moment. Everything felt like a Tuesday. You never had a weekend behind you, and you never had a weekend in front of you. Except we could just hang out when we got to our mission because there wasn't anything else to do. So people would sit and chat and clean their weapons. If you see Sergeant Starr on the top, cleaning his weapon, looking at magazines, just kind of kicking back and waiting for the next thing to happen, playing cards, racking out. So like I said in the beginning, we started traveling during the day. Towards the summer months when it was too hot to travel during the day, they had us traveling at night for various reasons. But this is one of my favorite parts, is a true soldier can sleep anywhere. I'm just gonna flip through these. Gun truck, table, gun truck, on top of a truck, on top of a Humvee, on top of a Humvee, in a tent after a horrible mission where we lost a guy. It was during the day. It was August 24th is the day he was killed. This is August 25th. It was over 150 degrees outside. We were rotating people. There was not enough room. I slept in my air conditioned vehicle that day because there was no room. Eventually they started paying attention to the fact that we were here and we needed places to sleep. It was a constant battle in the beginning, And as we were driving at night and needing places to sleep in the day that weren't outside, because when we were traveling it in the day, at night we would sleep outside on our cots. We'd sleep out in the open air. But now we needed something to shelter us from the heat and everything. So they started coming up with these tents, which had air conditioners in them. They were pretty decent. And it gave us time to just kind of chill out, get away from the heat, and sleep for as many hours as we could before we were back on the road, going back to our installation, which in turn we would be there for like a day or two and then turn around. And by the end, this is September of 2004. So towards the end, they really upped their game on the installation, whatnot. These are just some pictures of our gunners. They manned the gun trucks, and they had their machine guns. They had Mark 19s, which is the grenade launcher, M50s, M60s. They would wear, that's a Mark 19 grenade launcher. They would wear a lot of gear. That's me calling in a test fire, because the elements were horrible, day or night. And then this is the reality of war. This one, Bobby Drodowski flipped a vehicle. He's first platoon. This was our first actual landmine that it was a joint mission between 1st and 3rd platoon. And they went over a landmine. Jason Goldsmith in the bottom right, he is alive and well. I spoke at his wedding. But this was April 9th. If you ever look at April 9th, this was easy compared to what our sister company, the 705th, went through. They endured a 400 insurgent ambush in Baghdad. If you ever feel the need, look up Matt Maupin. He was a prisoner of war. He was killed. Tommy Thompson, KBR driver, he was captured. They had a way worse weekend than we did. So we should be happy that that's whatnot. So again, April 2004, that was April 9th. When we returned on April 11th, this is outside of Samara. Sergeant Christian, one of my soldiers, was hit by an IED, lost an eye. Every mission after these missions in the month of April, we were hit. It didn't matter if we were, it was when and how bad is it going to be. Every mission in April. This is actually May. This is probably one of the worst days of my life. This is, it was a crap mission, excuse my mouth. You can read about it in the book if you'd like. You can ask me questions about it later. This was my first soldier that died. His name was Sergeant Harlan, and he did not die immediately, but he did. That bottom left is 20 minutes after the vehicle was, there was a vehicle, a 4-door white sedan on the right side full of explosives, and it was an IED. Not to be confused with a V-bed. Those are vehicles where they are driving them. This was just a big, just massive bomb. Blew it up 50 meters behind my vehicle. And that was 20 minutes after. Oh, and if you look, just really quickly, you can't, it's like, this is bulging. It's like so bloated, and the top blew off. They told me to go back and get pictures, and I'm like, excuse me? But they needed pictures for whatever reason. This is just stuff that we'd see on the roads because there was just so much debris and life happening. This was up by a landmine, another landmine. This is my soldier who, that tent scene, we were told to go off of our main road into a really not great road for the vehicles we're driving, told us to turn off our lights and drive in blackout drive when we've got civilian vehicles with us. He did go over a cliff. He did not survive. This was Sergeant Nolan, Specialist Nolan and Private Burgess from 1st Platoon. On September 18th, they were blown up by a 500-pound bomb, engulfed in flames, and Sergeant Nolan passed away on September 30th. This is October of 2024, October 4th. This is 2nd Platoon. It was a horrible time. Again, there were so many, like, it was bad April. It was not great May. It was okay June, but no, we still lost people in June. We lost people, we didn't lose anybody in July. We lost people in August. We lost people in September. October comes, October 4th. You're like, okay, it's hot. And when I say it's hot, again, I'm not talking about the temperature. It was just chaos, complete chaos. They went on a mission that was just off from the start. The convoy commander was killed in this accident. That's my friend Bill Rowland. He was driving the vehicle and he just got a lot of shrapnel. The gunner did not die. He had 5 blood transfusions before going to Germany. From all of the surgeries and stress on his heart, he did pass away February of 2009 at the age of 27. This was while I was on R&R, Antonio. His call sign was Taz. He was crazy. He survived. He's now a chef. This right here was my biggest gun truck. It was called War Wagon. On December 8th, literally a year after I got my orders, they got hit. They got hit in Taji, the same place where I'd been hit so many times. Eric Marshall, aka Megady, he lived. He is fine. We did not have any deaths after October 4th, but we were still on the road, still getting hit. And sometimes civilians were in the crossfire, which is unfortunate. And these are just bridges that they would blow up. And then we'd build over them. And then they blow them up. That's the same, sorry, duplicate. This is Sergeant Harlan's funeral. We had a funeral for every soldier after. Generally, we would be taken off the road for a few days, sometimes a week. It was horrible because you're like, I don't want to be back here where I have to think. But there's always a silver lining. When you did have downtime at Anaconda, you could play video games. Baghdad International Airport had a Burger King. It was great in theory, horrible after just eating chicken and rice because then you were so sick. 4th of July, we had a tug of war. That is me going into the drink. That's us afterwards, all muddy. That's Waddell. His call sign was Possum. Celebrated birthdays, because we all have them. Celebrated the holidays. I like this one because just look at the dust. That's the life. Nothing was clean. Nothing was ever clean. And those are my guys. And the best part is when you go home. Thank you.
Thanks for describing the whirlwind of your deployment. So you're in Balad, Iraq. You're serving with the 660th. You're in charge of a platoon of 35 men. And one of your drivers suggests that they start calling you Mother Goose for your call sign. Tell us a little bit about how that happened, because that's what you named the book.
Yes. So I originally had the call sign Blackhawk because Chicago Blackhawks. I'm from Chicago. It just wasn't working out. There are some inappropriate 18 to 20 something year old humor that goes along with that call sign. So I'll just leave it at that. If you really want to know, you can come ask me afterwards. But so my driver was like, I think you should change your call sign. It's like, well, what do you think? I had only had it for a month. I wasn't like tied to it. And he was like, my gunner and I started just kind of spinning. We spent a lot of time together, the three of us. And he said, how about Mother Goose? And I was like, I like that. Okay. So that's what we did. So I became Mother Goose, and they still call me Mother Goose. They call me MG. They call me Ma Goose. They call me whatever. They're still boys. They'd be like, in your damn feathers. Like they would still be silly and funny, but it's a beloved name. We all had call signs because you don't want people knowing who you're talking to. Which I think is more the point of the story, is you don't want someone being like, oh, Lieutenant Hoza, because we had a lot of threats saying they wanted females, they wanted to capture females, they wanted to capture officers. Well, they're not going to be like, oh, there she is, so call signs were important. They kind of kept your identity as a private, you didn't know who you were listening to. So
You also wanted to stay connected to family back home, so you started writing emails. And these emails got shared, and they got shared, and they got shared even more. And then people who you don't even know were reading your emails because they kept getting shared. Was there a particular overall message that you wanted to convey, or did you just really want to stay in touch and let everyone know you're safe?
Definitely to keep in touch, because my family, I think, would attest to the fact that when I'd get busy on the road, I wouldn't necessarily be in contact as much. When my best friend back there is like, and if they didn't hear from me, all they had was what they were being fed on the news. So I think it was important to share what was going on. I don't know if I realized then it was kind of giving them a glimpse of what they weren't getting on the news or on the TV. So in that sense, I think, I'm glad I did it. And hindsight being 2020, yes, they did. One of my friends, who was our maintenance warrant officer in Iraq, is like, somebody I know got your email, and I had not known him before this deployment, so I don't know how they got this email. It just kind of traveled from place to place. It was shared by my minister during Sunday services. It was forwarded by my family. So a lot of times I could only email to my parents and my sister. I would try to do mass emails, but I'd be like, here, just forward to whomever. So that was kind of the gist, to keep in contact and let them know I was okay.
You missed some pretty big and significant family events while you were away. The biggest was that you couldn't be the maid of honor at your sister's wedding, and Betsy is here, sitting in the front row.
And still married.
Can you comment about what it was like being on the other side of the world, knowing that your sister was getting married?
Yeah, I think it just plain right out sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, to be quite blunt, I'm her little sister. You dream of she'd asked me to be her maid of honor. I also missed her bachelorette party. I missed all the fun things. Her bridal shower was on February 7th. I'm ruining her bridal party, being I'm deploying, and then she's that's hanging over her head. I'm on mission. She's getting married. I talked to them that morning, and it was so great to talk to all of them, but it was such a bittersweet. It was you're missing your sister's most important day. She did send me a place setting, and it said Chow Hall. She sent me all the things she could. They sent me the video afterwards. They sent me so many pictures and stuff. So it was probably it was just a big regret, overall. I swear, she said she would change it for me if I wanted, and I was like, no, that's ridiculous. She goes, I did not say that. I would never say that. I swear you did. That's 21 years ago, so who knows?
You described how Sergeant Harlan passed away, and you showed us the pictures of it. And you say even now, when May 14 rolls around, you know immediately what day it is and what you were doing. Can you comment on that and how that stays with you?
Yeah, and
20 years later.
Yeah, and I think my family probably bears the brunt of it. I get a little punchy, and I'm not necessarily a joy to be around, and I'm sorry, because sometimes I'm not. But it's just I just know. It's just this feeling. It's just this, oh, here we go again. Guess what? It's another anniversary. Has it gotten a little bit different over time? And no, I say different, not better, not worse, just different. I mean, I think you do with any loss, right? I mean, we've all incurred loss. Over time, it just kind of becomes different. So
You do reach out to his kids too,
I
you said.
do, and I ran Soldier Field 10 miler with his son.
Mhm.
So that was really special. And they dedicated his reserve unit. Again, he was from Kentucky, Owensboro, Kentucky. They dedicated his reserve unit to his name. And my dad, actually, we went down there for the dedication. My whole family and I did, yeah.
Nice. One of the other really inspiring parts of the book is how the community rallied around and sent you almost too many care packages.
Yes.
And people loved doing it. And then your dad took over and organized it and was assigning people different names to send
Yes.
to. Can you describe what that was like to
Yes.
get those care packages? And
Yes.
why they were so important?
One, you're a world away. It builds morale. You can't just go out to the store. Like I said, we're on the road constantly. So sometimes you're just kind of like, oh, it's nice to have like a thing of trail mix or like some jerky or Gatorade. But my family is super generous and they would send me packages and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is getting embarrassing. My dad loves a good task. Like there is no challenge or task that he will not take on. And so it was like he got all of the names of my platoon, even I was gonna say kids, even soldiers from the rest of the company that I knew weren't getting packages. And he developed a plan to make sure that everybody got something from somebody. For my stepmother's, was it her 50th birthday? Oh my gosh, I feel old now. They, instead of presents, they said donate to send gifts, and they sent a ton of packages, and Harley Davidson sent a Connex full of things for the school children so they could deliver backpacks full of stuff. But the community was so overwhelmingly generous and supportive of it. It was, I mean, it was insane.
I should note,
Yeah.
at that time, you could make a box and you just put free, and you didn't have to do any postage. And in
Wow.
fact, I sent her some sirens.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's
Secret.
in the book too.
Yeah.
And then finally, you just got back from celebrating with a couple of the soldiers who you served with. One of them was in retirement. That bond is so enduring. Can you explain that? You've done a lot with them over the years.
Yeah. We've done races. We've done Soldier Field 10 miler. I don't run anymore. We used to do it every year in honor of my fallen. My fellow soldiers came up and would run, they'd come up from Ohio and elsewhere and run, which just turned into us traveling together and doing stuff and seeing each other and spending time together. And it's a bond that you cannot break. You can't explain it, but I'm sure the veterans in here know, like once you put your hands in you put your life in their hands and they put their life in your hands, they would die for you, you would die for them. It's a powerful bond. And am I close to all of them? No, but I am very close to a lot of them. And we have our 20th reunion coming up this August. So of 20 years of being home. So it'll be good. It's always good to see them. I've been to a lot of weddings. I've been invited to christenings. I've been to just a lot of events or invited to a lot of events with them. And it's lessened over the years, but I mean, thank goodness for social media, right?
So Carrie, do you want to take some questions now?
Sure. You in the glasses.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like trying to come back to an upper middle class world community after everything you'd been through? I mean, how do you adjust?
The question was, what was it like coming back to the North Shore basically after being in war? I think, gosh, I've never been asked that question. I think like my father's return from Vietnam was very different than my return from Iraq. so much celebration, so many parties, so much love. Walking into O'Hare Airport, people clapping, like it was overwhelming. Like I think about that now, I'm like, oh God, that's a little overwhelming. But like my dad, they showed up on their mom's front porch like drowned rats, you know? They were going through a lot worse. And then I come back and it's like, oh, it's a party and it's great. And I did take some time off. I took a lot of time to decompress. I did not actually go back to work until May of 2005. My friend had gotten me an interview with a company that basically I didn't have to really interview for. So it was different. I was happy to be home. I did not go back to Harley Davidson. I had no desire to be away from my family. It was hard to sleep in a bed again. As weird as that seems, your back hurts because you're like, oh, this is so soft. Your bathroom is like down the hall versus a block away, which I didn't really mention, but you had to walk a good block to get to the bathrooms and stuff like that. As far as just, I don't know. I think part of me just kind of got back into the groove because what else was I gonna do? I just kind of kept going, I guess. And you keep your chaos in your own head. I think a lot of people do that for a while until they realize it's not necessarily the healthiest of things to do. But I talk about it openly because it does help process stuff. But thank you for asking. I don't know if that was really a good answer. Did you have?
Yes. To build on that, but if you want to say, well, we as a community, what can we do for the veterans that are coming back to I'm going to say inclusive? But the reaction, Vietnam veterans have much visceral. Some people. I had so some parents came back, and it was very much celebration, recognition, more of a thankfulness. But no one's ever spoken about or talked about after being back for 3 months, 3 weeks. I wish I had this at my disposal through my community, or I wish there was more of this. And fortunately, we can create family here. That's just one of those situations in which every day you go out, you
Right.
sit at your home and it's all back on the mat in the hall. It's surreal if you wish there was other on the big to say, I wish this was available in my community.
So his question was, what can the community do better to serve veterans coming home? And first of all, I would like to touch on that really quickly. I had so much support from my family. I had so much support from my family and my friends. Like, I never felt like I was going anything alone. Like, they have tolerated me at my best. They've tolerated me at my worst. What can the community do better? Mike is also an Iraq veteran. He, my best friend's husband, he deployed the day I was coming home. So she has 2 years of people being gone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that I've learned in my almost 20 years home is a lot of veterans, what they'll end up doing is they'll go back into their regular life, whatever that is, Harley Davidson, for me it was Target, different companies, whatever you're doing, or you're on an assembly line in Michigan. And what a lot of veterans do is they go right back into that life. And all the stuff that they went through is pushed to the very back of their mind. But when they retire, when they get laid off, like I did in 2015 at Target, that's when I struggled. That's when I didn't have that daily routine of going to the office, checking email, Outlook, all that stuff. When I didn't have the routine, it's when those intrusions came back. And luckily, Karen and Carrie both helped me with, hey, why don't you go see somebody at the VA? So just be on the lookout for someone that's getting close to retirement who is a veteran, and just see how you doing. How you doing? Is there anything we can help with? And I will tell you, I was the first call forward in 91. The VA today, vastly different than it was 30 years ago. Vastly. And so you can be proud of the VA that we have today. You couldn't say that 30 years ago, but you can.
And they have so many resources. I feel like when you come back, they do more of an out processing than they did stay for Vietnam. Like I said, I feel like were you just kind of given a plane ticket home?
What?
Were you given just a plane ticket home?
Which works.
You didn't have.
I was wounded, so I went to-
Well, that's right. He was wounded in the in the Tet Offense. So he had a little bit different transition, but I hope that helps a little bit. Support veteran organizations also, I say.
Carrie, what was your motivation to join ROTC in the first place?
I had changed my major quite a few times, and my dad was kind of like, why don't you think about this summer camp down at Fort Knox? And I was like, oh my gosh, no. And then I was like, well, I'm not doing anything else. And it was the best
Oh, really?
suggestion ever. The question was how I got involved. But so basically, my dad has been the spearheading force between all of my best decisions.
Let me answer that.
Okay, you can.
She was going to Carroll College, coming from New Trier. New Trier, a high school of 4,000, 5,000 students. Carroll College was
1,500.
1,500. And she started to outgrow Carroll College. And she also was thinking of becoming a police officer. So I suggested she take ROTC at Marquette and expand her horizons. And so she went and took ROTC at Marquette. And part of that was the Army offered a summer camp. And a good way to get rid of her, they'd fly her down, pay her, she plays with the tanks and the guns, and evidently she liked it.
And I still did apply for the Milwaukee Police Department. I went through all the testing and the interviews and the physical thing, and I was accepted. I was put on a waiting list, which was fine. I was still in college. And then it didn't matter because I forgot to tell them when I went to Korea. So, but yeah, so that was really the catalyst. Yes.
So you have such a wonderful bond with the men that you serve with. But what was it at the beginning? Is the woman, in charge of all the men of such varying ages? Was there any disrespect to start with? Was there any difficulties being a woman in that situation?
So being a woman with all these men, were there difficulties? What was it like? So I got there. I talked to my first sergeant over the phone. The first person I met was the gal I pointed to before, Amanda. So I just came in and I was kind of like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. They were already in the middle of training, so I was kind of going the first week. I was kind of on my own, but I was getting to meet them. The younger ones, not a problem. Not a problem. I would say the only one soldier I had was older, was kind of like, okay, but I don't know if it was because he was older and felt I wasn't going to be a good leader, or because I was a female. I don't know. It was interesting. My platoon sergeant and my squad leaders put him in place pretty quickly. And I would say my overall experience with these men, some of them very much boys, at the time, was wonderful. They were very protective of me. They were very supportive of me. They took care of me. They took me under their wing. I took them under my wing. I made sure that they were always my priority. They always made sure I was their priority. At least that's what I feel. And I feel like taking care of soldiers is what a good leader does. And I feel like I did that to my best of my ability. And I mean, I think I did a decent job. I have to say, any one of them I could call today and I know they'd be there for me, and the same in return.
So a story told to me when she came back from one of her soldiers in a bar and went with the group reunion.
It was in the reunion or my promotion party?
Yeah, but no, well, I don't remember. She said, he's talking to me, he says, your daughter, she said, they had a bridge they had to inspect for IEDs. And she said, She was going in and out and driving all around this thing. She has balls.
One other quick question, because you said like your call sign, you wouldn't want to give it away for a woman.
I guess
You were Mother Goose.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't make sense. Okay, Mother Goose. Obviously, that probably said I was a female. You know what? I don't even know.
It was more about the last name. It's about your name. Like, I would never use my name on.
But Mother Goose sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know. I used it all year.
Good idea.
Yeah, it was a good idea, because come talk to me afterwards. I'll tell you what they were calling me before.
Because I can't do that. How old were you when you were there? And then how old, again,
Okay.
the span of age of your soldier?
Okay, so how old was I when I was there? So I deployed a week after my 30th birthday. So, and I came back on literally deployed back right after I turned 31. Huh?
I can't remember how old you were.
Yeah, I was 30. My youngest was 18. My oldest was 53. So anywhere in between. And it gets a little weird now because I'm like, oh, I'm 51. Hi, just dated myself. But it's like, oh my gosh, these kids that were like 20 at the time are now like actually adults, functioning families, you know, kids. It's just kind of a weird, life is weird. Aging is weird. Yes.
I have two questions. My first, I'm curious if anyone in your group spoke the local language. And then the second question is, for me, I wasn't in the military, but I'm shocked in today's political climate to hear Hegseth, some of the changes that he's imposing. Can you comment on maybe even one change in your feeling?
Yeah, so wait, the first one was
What language?
Did any of my soldiers speak the language? And the second was kind of like the political climate right now and being female. So I would say my guys were on the road all the time. So there were some Iraqi citizens that were brought in to work on the installations, and they would, if you were part of headquarters, you were working with people, whether it was maintenance or cooks or this or that, and you were working, you'd have more interaction with, say, an Iraqi citizen, and you might pick up some words here or there, especially if they were, you know, translators, but not on my end. As far as the current climate, I don't tend to discuss like the politics of things. I do know one of my good friends who is a female in the Army is a little fit to be tied right now. And I think it will be interesting. Is it offensive as a female? Because here's my outlook on it. I was commissioned as combat service support. I was never supposed to see combat service support. When I joined in 1998, when I was commissioned in 1997, commissioned, females were not allowed in combat. Transportation Corps was never supposed to be in combat. But that's not how it went. There were no front lines in Iraq. There were no borders. If you're outside the wire, you're on the front line. And it goes back to like why the military police could get up armoring, but me hauling fuel can't. It's kind of like, you're combat service support. These people are military. No, we are all combat when we leave this gate. So is it a little insulting? I would deploy with every single female I served with in the 668. I would, time and time again, I would serve with them. Every single male in that unit, I would deploy with time and time again. I think there are great things to both men and women serving, and I hope that it continues on a positive path. Good? Good answer. But thank you for asking.
I think we could do one more question, then
Okay.
we better wrap up. Anybody?
It could be an outro. So you were there at the beginning when things were relatively calm, when I see your vehicle with no doors and no armor. You were there when things started to escalate majorly. What was the transition like for vehicles, for threat conditions, for intelligence briefings? Because things were not going well. You got there, and were going very much worse. And then I got there, and it got progressively worse.
So the question is, like, what was the transition like from when we first got there to when we left? So the unit that we took over from had been there for the ramp up. They were there for kind of just they were OIF 1. I was OIF 2. Were you 3? And then they stopped like counting.
I was 3 and 4.
Yeah, so I think they stopped counting them. When we got there, they were like, oh yeah, we had an accident and the biggest IED we saw was like the size of a pop can. So they made it seem like things were like, okay. But they're like, also, all the training that you did in Kuwait, forget about it. We're going to give you some of what we learned. And I was like, great. So we trained with them for a couple of weeks, not very long. But like I said, it was all on the job training. And it was kind of like, part of it is like, I feel like you just survive. Like when stuff starts blowing up around you, you have a choice. No, you really don't. You got to go through it. When you're being ambushed, you're not going to stop. You're going to call people behind you and you're like, hey, guess what? We're taking fire or we're going into the fire. And you're hauling because we are not stealth. We are not small. We are not anything. We just need to get out of the kill zone. And you have ways in which your gun trucks try to support you and kind of leapfrog it out to support, we only had like maybe 8 or 10 ambushes. I would take an ambush any day because there's someone behind that blast. IEDs, the person's like a mile away or they're like hidden and it's a very cowardly way to fight. Landmines, they're burying them like the night before or weeks before. It's just kind of hit or miss. So I think we just learned and your reactions we made mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes. Knowing then what I know now, I would have done a lot of things different, but you don't know what you don't know. And it did get worse.
The enemy was adapting to us.
Correct.
And so, like, if you were a gunner on a gun truck, not long after she left, we lost a lot of men who got decapitated because they put sharp razor wires across the road. And we had to adapt. We had to then put rods in front of the trucks that would cut those wires. And then they would adapt, and then we would adapt. It was quite a brutal war.
It was constantly relearning and constantly having the intel I felt like pretty good. Like the day Sergeant Harlan died, I will say this. My briefing was that they were using vehicles as bombs. So there were a lot of abandoned vehicles on the road that day. I felt, and it was not my usual mission. My IED jammer was taken out of rotation for services, which I'm sure it didn't need, but whatever. That was taken out. Harlan usually drove that vehicle that jammed signals. He was stuck into a green truck hauling fuel. It was a day mission. We never went on a there and back mission. All of our missions were there, sleep, return the next day. So it was very much not our normal mission, but our Ramadi, we've been there time and time again. So we drove down there. I reported every single vehicle. I felt like a fool. I'm like, hey, it's me again. Look at this as the grid coordinate. There's a vehicle, whatever. Got there, downloaded our fuel in record time. Things were going great. I'm like, oh, great, we're gonna get back. We're gonna have some downtime. And on the way back, I was like, oh, there's this vehicle again. Like it was, the blast was timed off of my vehicle. I am the front vehicle. So I'm like, we're moving to how we're supposed to go. We're moving to the left and I didn't even get the words out of my mouth and it was blown up and I don't even know where I'm going with this, but things just happened and it just got worse and where was I going with this? But
adapting.
You adapt. But you get the information, and the information is good, but you can't always defend against the information when the fighting is so cowardly and unpredictable. But yeah, so sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there. I get a little passionate about Harlan, I'm not gonna lie.
Thank you.
On that note.
Thank you for your service.